The gunshot echoed across the Brazos bottomland before Austin Harris heard her scream. He found Marbella Thompson clinging to a log in Owl Creek's flash flood, blood streaming from her temple, her wagon overturned upstream. She wasn't just drowning, someone had shot her first and left her to die.
Hello, compliments of the season. If you love heartwarming stories about life in times past, then you'd enjoy these stories. Comment where you're watching from, like and share these videos with loved ones as you enjoy them. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel too. My team and I have something free and beautiful for you once we hit the 1,000 subscriber mark. It will be shared in the community. You know, we go to great lengths to make these videos, and your support means a lot to us. Therefore, we plan to give back to you once we are able to, so be a part of what we are building.
The crack of the gunshot echoed across the Brazos bottomland like a thunderclap. Austin Harris froze mid-swing, his hammer suspended over the fence post. The sound didn't belong to the afternoon quiet of his ranch, didn't belong to the meadowlarks or the rustling cottonwoods or the distant murmur of Owl Creek. It was sharp, violent, wrong. For a moment, he thought it was a memory from Shiloh, another ghost from the war. But then he heard it, a scream, high, terrified, human. Austin dropped his tools and ran. His boots pounded across the rough Texas earth as he scanned the horizon. Then he saw the creek. Owl Creek, usually lazy and shallow, had transformed into a churning brown monster, swollen with upstream storms he hadn't even noticed gathering. Debris raced past in the current, broken branches, an overturned wagon. A woman. Austin's heart slammed against his ribs. She was half submerged, clinging desperately to a cottonwood log that bucked and rolled in the violent water. Her dark hair was plastered to her face. Blood streamed from her temple, bright red against pale skin. One arm wrapped around the log while the current tried to rip her away. Her head dipped under, came back up, barely. She was drowning. Austin didn't think, didn't plan, didn't pray. He moved. He kicked off his boots, dropped his gun belt, and dove into the freezing creek. The shock of the cold punched the air from his lungs. The current grabbed him like a fist, yanking him sideways, slamming debris into his ribs and back. He fought it with every ounce of strength he'd built from war and survival and years of working this unforgiving land. When he reached the log, his fingers were already numb. He grabbed the slick wood to steady himself and reached for her arm. "Hold on!" he shouted over the roar. She didn't answer. Her eyes were half closed, her lips blue. She was slipping away. He wrapped one arm around her waist and pulled. She came free with a sudden jerk, and the current immediately tried to claim them both. Austin kicked hard, angling toward the bank, dragging her weight through the rushing water. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but slowly, painfully, stroke by stroke, he got them to shore. He collapsed onto the mud beside her, chest heaving, arms shaking like he'd just fought 10 men at once. For a long, terrible second, she didn't move. Then she coughed, a harsh, choking sound that was the most beautiful thing Austin had ever heard. Her eyes opened, dark brown, foggy with fear and pain. "You're safe," Austin said, breathless. She flinched away from him, scrambling weakly backward through the mud, even though she could barely sit up. Her dress was torn, ripped at the shoulder, clinging to her body. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling violently. That's when Austin saw it clearly. The bullet graze across her temple, fresh and bleeding. Where am I?" she whispered, voice shaking. "Brazos country," he said, keeping his voice calm, steady. "My land. You're safe now." Terror flooded her face. "You're not taking me to town," she said, suddenly, desperately. "Please, not town." The fear didn't make sense, but Austin wasn't a man who forced anyone into anything. "I'm not taking you anywhere but somewhere warm," he said simply. "You'll die out here." She tried to stand. Her legs buckled. Austin caught her before she hit the ground. She stiffened in his arms but didn't fight. He carried her all the way back to his ranch house, her head resting against his chest, her breathing shallow and fast. Inside, the single room was warm from the fire he never let die. He set her gently in the chair closest to the hearth and tossed more wood on the flames. "Get those wet clothes off," he said, turning away to give her privacy. His tone wasn't rough, just practical, the voice of a man who'd seen too many people freeze to death. She froze. Her voice shook. I won't be a bother. As soon as my clothes dry, I'll go." "You're not going anywhere. Creek's too high. Storm's still coming." The silence was thick between them. Fire crackling, her breath trembling, the wind pressing against the walls. Austin made coffee and added a generous splash of whiskey. He set a cup beside her without looking. When he finally turned back, she was wrapped in his spare wool blanket, her wet dress hanging near the fire. Her cheek was bruised, her hands trembled around the cup, her eyes stared into the flames like something terrible lived inside them. "My name is Austin Harris," he said quietly. She lifted her gaze. For the first time, something besides fear flickered there. "Marbella Thompson," she whispered. They drank in silence. Firelight danced across her exhausted face, painting shadows under her eyes. Austin didn't ask questions. Not yet. He understood danger. He understood running. Whatever brought her to his creek, bleeding and terrified, could wait until she was ready to tell it. The storm hit an hour after sunset. Rain hammered the roof like gunfire, and Marbella flinched with every crack of thunder. Austin pretended not to notice. He moved around the cabin with quiet efficiency, making more coffee, checking the fire, giving her space to breathe. When he finally sat across from her at the small table, he pushed a tin plate toward her. Beans and cornbread, simple but hot. She stared at it like she didn't know what to do. "Eat," he said gently. "You need your strength." She picked up the spoon with shaking hands. After a few bites, some color returned to her face. Austin sipped his coffee and waited. He'd learned patience in the war, learned that some stories couldn't be rushed. Finally, she spoke. "My husband died 3 weeks ago." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Charles Thompson. He owned a ranch near Waco. Good land, water rights on the Brazos." Austin nodded, saying nothing. "He fell," she continued, her eyes fixed on her plate. "Drunk. Broke his neck on his own porch." She swallowed hard. "His foreman, Dalton Greer, he said Charles changed his will before he died, left everything to Greer." "Did he?" Austin asked quietly. "No." The word came out like a knife. "Charles never changed anything. He was too drunk most days to sign his own name. But Greer had papers, fake ones. And when I said they were lies, he went to the sheriff, told him I poisoned Charles, that I murdered my own husband for the ranch." Her hands were shaking so hard now that coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup. Austin reached across and steadied it, his fingers warm against hers. "So you ran," he said. It wasn't a question. "I ran," she whispered. "Took what little money I'd hidden away over the years and ran. I thought if I could get to Austin, maybe Fort Worth, I could find someone who'd listen. But Greer, he sent men after me. They caught up to me at the creek. One of them shot at me. My horse threw me, and then the wagon overturned and—" Her voice broke. She didn't finish. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the fire crackled and hissed. Austin stood and laid out his bedroll on the floor near the hearth. "You take the bed," he said, his back to her. She didn't argue this time, but as the fire dimmed and shadows grew long across the rough wooden walls, her voice came from the darkness behind him, soft, broken, ashamed. "Mr. Harris?" He didn't turn. His jaw tightened. "What is it?" A long pause. Her breathing was shaky, uneven. When the words finally came, they hit him like a physical blow. "Will you stay if I undress?" The question hung in the air like smoke, a raw, broken offer, an echo of fear and shame from a life he didn't yet understand, a transaction she'd learned to make to survive. Austin stared hard at the dying coals, his hands curling into fists against the floorboards. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. When he spoke, his voice came out low, rough, and final. "No one is bothering you here," he said. "Get some sleep." Behind him, she let out a quiet, choked sob. She tried to hide it, burying her face in the blanket, but he heard it anyway, every broken sound. Austin Walker lay awake on the hard floor, staring at the fire, knowing the flood had washed more than one kind of storm into his life that night. The morning light crept into the cabin slowly, pale and hesitant. Austin was already up, standing in the doorway, staring at the creek. It had calmed some overnight, but not enough. The water still ran high and fast, chewing at the banks, carrying debris downstream. No one was crossing that for days. He didn't hear Marbella stir, but he felt it. The shift in her breathing, the soft rustle of the blanket, the quiet dread settling between them like thick fog. When she finally rose from the bed, she moved stiffly, favoring her right side. Her limp was worse than yesterday. Her eyes were red, not from sleep, but from tears she'd cried in the dark. "Creek's still too high," Austin said without turning around. "I see that." Her voice was flat, empty. She dressed in silence, then stepped outside. Austin watched from the window as she limped toward the small vegetable garden behind the cabin, kneeling carefully in the dirt to pull weeds. He told her she didn't have to. She only said, "It's better than sitting." Days passed like that, slow, quiet, heavy. They shared the cabin, but not their thoughts. They cooked together, ate together, did chores side by side, but still lived like two strangers trapped in the same ghost-filled room. Yet Austin watched her more than he wanted to admit. He saw things, the way she flinched when he moved too quickly, the way she unconsciously touched old bruises on her arms, the way she never quite relaxed, always tense, always waiting for something bad. One afternoon, while she hung laundry on the line outside, her sleeve shifted as she reached up. Austin saw them, scars, thin, pale lines crisscrossing her back like someone had dragged fire across her skin. Old scars, healed but permanent. He turned away quickly, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He knew what scars like that meant. He'd seen them on soldiers, on prisoners, on the broken. He said nothing. Not yet. Marbella watched him too, in her quiet way. She noticed things. How he never raised his voice, even when the mule kicked over a water bucket. How he flinched at sudden noises, his hand instinctively reaching for a gun that wasn't there. How he woke at night, breath fast, eyes sharp, staring into the darkness like he was seeing battlefields instead of cabin walls. Two wounded souls, circling each other in a tiny wooden prison. On the fourth morning, Austin walked inside and found Marbella sitting at the table, her shoulders shaking. She held a small photograph in her hands, staring at it like it was the only thing left in the world. He recognized grief when he saw it. He made noise on purpose, scraping his boot on the threshold so she wouldn't feel ambushed. She straightened quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's nothing," she said, her voice thick. "Just foolish memories." Austin didn't push. Her pain was hers to give, not his to take. But he saw the photograph before she tucked it away. A baby, tiny, dressed in white christening clothes. Later that night, he heard her whisper softly to the photograph in the dark. He had his father's eyes. The words were so quiet, so broken, that Austin pretended he didn't hear them. That night, something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but the first crack in the armor they both wore. The storm outside had passed, but the storm between them was just beginning. Want to know what Marbella whispers next? Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when two broken souls finally start to heal. On the sixth evening, the silence finally broke. Austin came in from checking the horses and found Marbella at the table, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs she couldn't control anymore. The photograph lay face up on the worn wood. He stood in the doorway, uncertain. He'd faced Confederate cavalry charges with less fear than this moment required. He cleared his throat deliberately, giving her time. She straightened quickly, swiping at her tears, trying to hide the storm. "It's nothing," she said, voice raw. "Just being foolish." But Austin saw the photograph, saw the grief carved into her face. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "My name was on that baby," she whispered before he could speak. Her fingers traced the edge of the photograph. "Samuel. He lived 2 days. 2 days of breathing and crying and being perfect." Her voice cracked. "Charles said it was my fault, that I was broken inside, that God was punishing me for something.
Austin's hands clenched under the table. "There were 2 others before him," she continued, the words spilling out now like water through a broken dam. "I lost them early. Charles blamed me for those too, said I wasn't woman enough to carry his sons." The firelight caught the tears on her cheeks. Maybe he was right. He wasn't. Austin's voice came out harder than he intended. He softened it. "Loss like that, it's not punishment. It's just cruel luck, and any man who made you feel shame for it wasn't worth the air he breathed." Marbella looked up at him, surprise flickering through the grief. Austin leaned back in his chair, his own ghosts rising. "I had a best friend," he said quietly. "James Coltrane. We grew up together, joined the army together. At Shiloh, we got separated from our unit. I hesitated, just for a second, couldn't decide which way to go." He stared at his scarred hands. "James made the decision for me, pushed me left, took the bullet that was meant for my chest, died in my arms while I tried to stop the bleeding with my bare hands. The cabin was so quiet that the crackling fire sounded like thunder. I came home 2 years later," Austin continued. "Found out my fiancée thought I was dead. She'd married someone else, had a baby on the way." He finally met Marbella's eyes. "We both lost things we'll never get back, pieces of ourselves that just gone." Marbella reached across the table. Her hand, small and scarred, covered his. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Me too." They sat like that as the fire burned low. 2 people who'd survived things that should have killed them. 2 people who understood that some wounds never fully heal. You just learn to live with the ache. That night, for the first time since she'd arrived, Marbella fell asleep without crying. And Austin, for the first time in years, didn't wake from nightmares of Shiloh. Outside, the creek continued its slow retreat. The storm was passing, but neither of them was ready for what was coming.
The rider appeared on the 8th morning, a dark silhouette against the pale Texas sky. Austin saw him first, shading his eyes against the sun as the man approached at an easy lope. Luther Hayes, a hand from the neighboring Garrett Ranch. Marbella stepped onto the porch, saw the rider, and went rigid. All the color drained from her face. Her hand gripped the doorframe so hard her knuckles turned white. "You know him?" Austin asked quietly. "No, but he might know me." Luther reined in his horse 20 feet from the cabin, nodding respectfully to Austin. "Morning, Harris. Heard you had company." His eyes slid to Marbella with open curiosity. Austin's jaw tightened. "News travels fast." "Always does." Luther shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble, but there's talk in Waco. Thought you should know." "What kind of talk?" "About a widow named Thompson, Marbella Thompson." Luther's gaze fixed on her now. "That you, ma'am?" Marbella said nothing. Her face was stone, but her hands trembled. Luther continued, his voice cautious. "Dalton Greer's been stirring things up in town. Says his boss, Charles Thompson, was murdered, poisoned by his wife. Says she ran off with money that belonged to the estate." Austin stepped forward, putting himself between Luther and Marbella. "That's a lie." "Maybe so," Luther said carefully, "but Greer's got the sheriff believing it. Got witnesses too, or so he claims. They're looking for her, Harris. Sheriff's fixing to put together a search party." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Luther tipped his hat. "Just thought you should know. I don't know what's true and what ain't, but Greer's got influence. Be careful." He turned his horse and rode off, dust trailing behind him. The silence he left was suffocating. Inside the cabin, Marbella stood with her arms wrapped around herself, shaking like she was freezing despite the warm morning. "He's right," she whispered. "Greer will say anything. He's wanted that land for years. The water rights alone are worth a fortune. Charles wouldn't sell to him, so now—" Her voice broke. "Now he's gonna take it, and he'll hang me to get it." Austin leaned against the doorframe, studying her carefully. "What else aren't you telling me?" She turned to face him, and something cracked open in her expression, raw, desperate. "Charles wasn't just a drunk, Austin. He was mean. When he lost at cards, when the ranch did poorly, when he was just in a foul mood, he took it on me. She lifted her chin, tears streaming down her face now. I saved every penny I could hide over the years, buried it in a tin can behind the barn. It was all I had, my only chance at freedom, at a future. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And the baby, Samuel, I lost him because Charles came home drunk one night and shoved me down the stairs. Austin felt something dark and violent coil in his chest, his hands curled into fists. Marbella kept talking, the words pouring out now. There were 2 others before Samuel. I lost them the same way. Charles's fists, Charles's rage. And Greer, he saw it all. He was there. He watched and never said a word. She stared at the floor. Charles and I married in front of a circuit preacher on the trail 5 years ago. He promised to file the papers in town. He never did. Legally, I was never his wife. I have no claim to anything, no rights, nothing. There it was, the whole truth, shaking in her voice. She expected disgust. She expected him to throw her out. Instead, Austin spoke with the low rumble of distant thunder. Papers don't make a person worthy, Marbella, and surviving what you survived, that takes more courage than any soldier I ever knew. He stepped close.